This episode is sponsored by Wix Studio.
When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back. This is the HTML All the Things Podcast. This episode is ridiculously titled. We went through 13 plus iterations of title. And I found a very cheesy one that I really liked, and we ended up just sticking with it because we went through so many iterations, and it is... Can't even say it. Side projects, the eternal loop of never-ending features. It sounds like we're like a we're a spin-off of like the developer version of like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe or something. I don't know why.
Maybe that's where we go. Maybe that's the next step for us as we become a fantasy web development podcast.
We joined Narnia. I mean, there was a guy that I knew. I didn't know him, but it was way back, Xbox Live days, Xbox 360. My one buddy that I actually do, he had a buddy who had a buddy. So like we're 3 deep now. But I never heard this man say anything except for the word Narnia. He would join the Xbox party and he would listen to what we had to say. Like, oh, you know, cover me left, cover me right, whatever, playing Call of Duty. He would do that, like he would take it and understand it, and it was not a small child. This was like a 30-year-old man, and he would just only say Narnia in like a super high-pitched voice. So like it was almost like an acknowledgement, be like, yo, dude, like, you know, cover my left flank. Narnia. I have never, and he played with him for hours, like probably 100 hours, and I never heard him say anything but Narnia. But random little bit of Matt lore there. I don't know what else to say. Like, that's just what happened. I can't make this stuff up. Anyway, you're not here for Narnia. You're here for the you're here for the eternal loop of never-ending features about your side projects. Hey, you know what? I will say this. It's way better than my like boring title, which was Preventing Scope Creep in Personal Projects, otherwise known as the name of your next PowerPoint presentation that you have to sit through. Anyway, if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you go check us out on that Patreon, leave a review, rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And I'm going to tell you what this episode's about now in this very long and boring introduction. No, it's not boring. We're going to do an introduction, though. So this episode is not necessarily about scope creep. Scope creep is kind of like a keyword in this sort of space. And we recently had an episode on scope creep and how to deal with it, how to push back. Like if you're a freelancer and you're pushing back against a client, or if you're an employee and you want to push back against your employer for good reason. And so it was kind of inspired by that episode, because if we think about it, we're really hard on ourselves too often. And web developers always want to sort of make new projects. We want to, it'd be cool if there was a web app here. It'd be cool if I had a niche site here. It'd be cool if I had this, that. It's all over the place, right? And after that initial spark of an idea, the excitement of what to do and what to work on, and it's like, oh my God, I get to work on something new. It's like a cloud. It's like a fog. And it fogs up the developer's vision and very oftentimes causes them to miss something. Actually, to miss a bunch of things. You'll be like, you know what? It'll be easy for me to make a Facebook clone. And we're going to get so many people on this thing. And it's like, hang on here. You're not thinking this through. You're looking at Facebook just on your screen, right? You're at facebook.com. You're logged in. And you're thinking, it's easy to have a like button. It's easy to have a wall full of content. It's easy to do this. It's easy to do that. But you're not thinking about the difficulty level. You're not thinking about, hang on, behind the scenes, there's a huge amount of work that goes into this. That heavy lifting is done not only by humans, but also by an algorithm. The algorithm is feeding you content. How are you going to moderate all this stuff, right? There's a bunch of scaling issues here. Like if people start posting a whole bunch of things, how are you going to moderate that? Where are you going to store all this data? How many superfluous features of this, Facebook clone is there? What about marketing? You don't think about these things. You're in that fog of like, oh, something new. I have this super cool idea. I'm just going to start working on it. And nothing kills a project faster than diving in finally, taking that first step and realizing, oh my God, I thought this was going to be 6 steps. It's now 200. The journey's too long. And you just stop doing it. You just stop working on it. So when we made Clicks to Riches, which was a Chrome app, still available. It's a little Chrome app game available on Chromebooks, I believe, still. We had a game developer friend do the art for us, and he brought with him sort of a productivity or a planning method called a GDD, which was a game design document. He had gone to college for game development. And this GDD, this document, housed what the game was going to be in its purest form. And most importantly, at least in my opinion, it housed a wish list section. This is where good ideas were written down, but not admitted into the main document. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to have some super cool integration with Facebook gaming. And then, it's going to be like super awesome because it's going to like hook up into Facebook coins. I don't know if that's a thing. And like, all this sort of superfluous stuff, all that stuff, cool idea. Let's put that in the wish list section, but let's work on what's actually in the document, which is the version 1.0 of the game, which is effectively the MVP, the minimum viable product. So that kind of idea has really kind of stuck with Mike and I, and we don't make GDDs for web apps and stuff like that because it's not games, right? Game design document. But we do have this sort of initial spark, this initial fog, and we talk about, 800,000 majillion, whatever, blah, 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 things that could be in our idea. And then we say, okay, what's the MVP though? Let's be a little disciplined here. Let's be a little more realistic. Once that fog is cleared, or maybe we're clearing the fog, what are we actually going to do on this project, right? And this does not just include technical things. Like, we're developers. We're obviously developing this thing. We're talking about technical things like crazy, of course. There's a whole other side to this stuff, right? And the side of it is there's marketing. There's other things to consider. And so a really, really common thing that people overlook is, I'm going to make this content site and it's going to be super cool, and I'm going to make it with this stack, right? We're into the tech side. I'm going to make it with this stack. I'm going to plug into this service and that service and this. I'm going to go over here, left, right, center, up, down, left. Oh, hang on. What about SEO? Oh, SEO is easy. Don't worry about it. We'll just do it. It's like, well, SEO for what? You need to have your content put together. And a very common type of project, if we were to just sort of look at this through a silo, in a sort of silo project, is I'm going to make a content site. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to leverage organic SEO. That type of project is big enough. It is big enough to be a project on its own. Content is no joke. SEO is no joke. Having articles written, it sounds simple because you're like, well, you just write it and you go. Sure, from a technical perspective, that stuff is easy, but someone still has to do it. And if you have a project that's like a web app with just like a content section on the side, and you're doing it solo, that's your side project, you're starting to get too many things all kind of crammed in here. Like, if you yourself decide, okay, I want to make a personal blog. I want it to be a personal blog, but it's going to be about sort of my brand. I'm going to talk all about, what's a web development thing? React, sure. I'm going to be the React guy. I'm going to talk all about React. I'm not going to blog about personal project topics, but what I want this site to be is I want it effectively to be a content site with me at the helm, so people know who's writing this content. I want to leverage as much organic SEO as I can, right? I want to drive, revenue by having on-page ads, maybe some affiliate marketing, things like that, right? And I want this to effectively fuel a bit of passive income. I want this to be a passive income stream for me. Well, I mean, okay, great. That's a great idea. And us as web developers will usually say, okay, we're going to go make the actual site custom with custom code. Let's say you scrap that. And you go, I'm going to use like a WordPress. I'm going to use like, whatever. I'm going to use a blogging platform. You're still going to have to do a lot of niching down. You're still going to have to shave off a lot of fat. You're still going to have to come up with, okay, hey, am I going to do everything on React? Am I going to be the React performance guy? Is React niche down enough? Like, what is this? So, like, what is the scope of what I'm doing here? And so I want to this episode to really address that. And I've defined sort of several different headings in ways you can take your idea from sort of something that's all over the place to something that's sort of like a disciplined, like, I'm going to ship this thing. This is what I'm going to aim for. I'm going to have milestones and I'm going to hit them, instead of it being like, you know what, like, I wanted to be the React guy, but that project kind of got out of hand. I ran out of time. So I'm going to go work on something else now. I'm going to go work on a calculator, but the calculator is going to connect to, and it starts becoming too much. So there's these key kind of points. I'm just going to list them out. So defining a solid MVP, or minimum viable product, is going to be the first one. We're then going to be talking about niching down. How do we niche these projects down to something that's a little more coherent and is not covering absolutely everything? We want to cast a net, but we don't want to cast a net around the world. We want to cast a net in our lake of like people we're trying to capture, whether it's developers or, I don't know, golf enthusiasts or whatever. We can't capture everybody. We're one person or we're a small team. This is a personal project. We're going to talk about prioritizing features using a system, which is an acronym called Moscow: must have, should have, could have, and won't have. And then establishing milestones is the last one. And then I kind of have like another one, but it's just sort of a summarization of what we're going to cover, which is set strict boundaries, because a lot of these points is about setting boundaries, preventing that scope creep, and effectively, hopefully pushing you toward being like, you know what, this project is doable. It's not all over the place. I am going to ship this thing. So let's jump in, unless you have a point to add there, Mike.
Yeah, I do have a point. I think this is a really relevant topic for a lot of reasons. And the top one is like the meme, right, of developers just starting side projects and never finishing them. And that, on the one hand, it's okay to go down a route, realize that it's not working, and then, you know, pivot to something else. But the problem becomes is when you're a consistent non-finisher of projects, right? Like that's where it becomes a serious problem when you come to an interview, you open your portfolio and you have nothing of like actual substance to show. You just have, you know, 20 different GitHub repos with like 10% of each project done. That is a serious problem. Like as a hiring man, as someone that's hired people, and I've looked at GitHub repos that had very, very few features built out that didn't work. Like obviously were just started and then abandoned. That is an immediate indicator to me that you haven't dove deep into anything yet. A finished project that's deployed, that has users, is the key. I'm telling you, it's the key to you getting your first developer job. I can almost guarantee you. Or the key to you actually establishing a solid side business, right? Like it depends what your priorities are. Like you could have a product that you want to actually sell, or you could have, it could be both. Like you want to use this project as a portfolio piece and you want to actually have a user base that's monetizable. That's totally viable. But the point is that if you're looking for a job and you're a developer out there that's trying to kind of break into the industry, having a graveyard of unfinished projects is not going to help you. So this is the episode that you need to hear, and you need to actually enact like the advice to finish your project. Get at least one or up to three, like at least three really, projects to a completed state. And completed is a very different word. Like every project has a very different completion state. This is why defining your MVP is so important. And Matt will just jump right into that right now. But like it is super important to make something that like plant something that is actually doable. Creating Facebook, like Matt said, is not a doable project unless you want to just create the UI, obviously. You can't build the scaling, the user base, et cetera, of Facebook as a solo developer. You just can't do it. So you need to make sure that you're doing something that's unique, that's a MVP, that's something that you can actually accomplish in a reasonable amount of time.
A lot of this episode is going to be about being disciplined, right? Like coming off of what the heels of what Mike just said, like you're going to have to be disciplined. You can't be like, let's add this, let's add that. It's like, no, like this is a side project. You want to do it, whether it's to get a job just for fun or to learn something, like whatever. Like there's 1,000,001 goals out there. I'm not going to list your goals. Like you have a personal project in your head and you want to go, you want to like ship it. You want it to be good. It's like a big thing is hindsight, right? Where it's like, you know, you're 10 years down the line, you had 1,000,001 projects, which is ridiculous. That's way too many. But, you know, you had all these projects that you started, you finished, or maybe you didn't even start. You just kind of like sparked the idea, you wrote it down, and then that was it. And you're like, oh my God, like, you know, I'm 10 years down the line here. I haven't shipped anything. And I would like my portfolio to say, I shipped this, I shipped that, I shipped this. Are you going to get more satisfaction? Like, what are you going to get more satisfaction out of? It's more of a question rather than a statement. It's like, are you going to get more satisfaction out of your planning skills? If that's true, then fine, plan away and don't ship things. But many people want to ship things. They want to say, you know, I shipped this. Maybe it failed commercially, but I shipped this. Okay, then I went and did this. Okay, then I went and did this. Okay, then I went and did this. Instead of being like, hey, what do? You know, I'm a developer. You know, all my projects, all my stuff is behind closed doors. I'm not getting credit for it publicly because it's behind closed doors and it's for clients. It's for my employer. It's for whatever. And some employers will share it, yes. But again, do you have your own sort of like hopes and dreams and projects? And probably. And so you need to be disciplined if you want these things to ship, because that fog after the initial spark of an idea makes you think everything's going to be easy, and it's not going to be. So what you need to start doing is, first point here, defining a solid MVP, which is a minimum viable product. This is a product. This is a version of the product. Think of it as a version 1.0 of your product. And it really, really needs to be focused. You need to choose a core value, a core feature, core functionality. Notice I keep saying the word core. You need this thing to do exactly what the product is going to do. So an example, Mike and I recently had a space where we're talking about building a product in public. And we decided on, we're going to have a golf score tracker. Okay. And my whole thing, my core value is there are tons of these things out there, but they all do a bunch of stuff. Oh, GPS. Okay. What we'll do is you click start a round. It'll automatically detect what course you're on. It'll show you the range, like where you're at. And it'll be like, oh, how many putts, how many this. Lots and lots of data, lots and lots of superfluous things. Do you know what a lot of my friends do with these apps, and myself included? Do we use all this crap? No. Usually we're out there. We don't want to be on our phones. So what happens is we write it down on the piece of paper they give us, write the score down, and then we go to the simplest mode of these apps. We select the golf course and we say, I scored 100, I scored 10, I scored 90, I scored whatever. If you scored 10, that's crazy, but that's also not possible. But anyway, in an 18. But anyway, the point of the matter is that what we want as a core value for this thing is we want it to be simple. Simple, simple, simple. That's the whole point. I want this thing to just be a score tracker, maybe with a few different modes. We want to have serious debate over what features we add. I want this thing to have as minimum amount of features as possible. So that's perfect. That complements itself perfectly with my minimum viable product. And by doing this, we keep it lean, which is very, very important. Mike and I could add a thing where it's like, hey, track your score, but also we'll check your GPS and find you a hotel close to the golf course. Is that super helpful for some people? Yes. Is that a feature of some app? Probably. However, that's not a part of the core value, and it should not be a part of the MVP. It's not going to be easy. It's adding a feature that people may not use, which is another part of choosing your MVP features, which is you need to validate, or most people would like to validate quickly. And this happens after initial releases. You want your product to release lean. It has, say, 5 features. Okay, great. What if it was 6? What if it was 6 features? So let's say Mike and I make this golf scoring app. It's 5 features. The 6th features is this hotel thing. We spent so much time on it. It delayed the release. We release it and no one uses it. Oh, great. That's not good. What we want is our core 5 features to be validated. Maybe no one uses the 5th feature. We cut one of the features. We change it. We manipulate it. We need people to talk about it. Maybe people want to use a feature, but it's too superfluous. It's too bulky. It's too weird, or it's obfuscated and they didn't know it existed. Things like that, right? And that leads to the next point, which is reducing complexity. Not only for you, the developer, less features and less complex features, the faster you're going to be able to finish things. But you don't want to overcomplicate things for the user, right? You don't want to introduce them to like 700,000 features. We all hate those tutorial pop-ups. Well, if your app has 14,629 features, there's got to be 14,629 tutorial pop-ups. They're going to be learning this app for the next 10 years. It's reduce the complexity on yourself and on the user, and make it so that someone goes to download this app. They didn't think to themselves, I'm going to open up Google Play Store, and this golf app better have 14,629 features. It better have all 14,000 of these. No one thinks that. They think, I needed something to track my score. Okay, they type in golf score tracker. Okay, that one. That's usually what people do nowadays because there's so much software out there. You don't need that crazy amount of complexity. You want your product to be super, super lean. And so what you want to do is you want to ship this thing lean, validate quickly, but plan for scaling, plan for iteration. Just know in your head, hey, if people are really asking for that hotel feature, if all my competitors are getting into the hotel feature, maybe I should take a look at that. You don't have to ship this thing in its final form. And in fact, you shouldn't. Because if you make 14,629 features and only 13,000 are used, which is a lot, over 1,629 features are not used. How much time, money, planning, thoughts, brain space, brain time was used on these features. You need to be disciplined here. You need to go, that's it. We're building this. So what Mike and I did for the GDD was we came up with that GDD and we stuck to that. And then we did a big update later. So we actually built the app internally. We said, this is our MVP. We played it and we validated quickly ourselves. We didn't even release it. We played it and we said, all three of us, we said, this sucks. It has this problem, this problem, this problem. Let's dump another week of development time in it. Let's fix this, and then ship it. It's still very disciplined. It's still very much like, hey, gotta make this thing lean, make this thing go, whatever. Because here's the thing. Let's just say there were 5 initial features to this app. Let's just say there were 5. And we keep listening to ourselves and we added, every day we develop, we're like, let's add another feature, add another feature, add another feature. And we developed over a week. So let's say we added 7 features, right? So now we're at 12 features. We're at 12 features total. Okay, great. Is it? Because we would probably do the testing at the end of that MVP. First of all, the features wouldn't be done, so it'd be over a week. And then we'd be like, oh my God, we have to, add these other features. We still have to add this, we still have to add that. Now we have to fix all these other things. We have to take into consideration all these other features, these 7 features that we've added. It's crazy, right? It's too many things. So, plan for iteration. Do not assume your product is going to be perfect, right out of the gate. That's foolish. It's not going to be perfect. People are going to hate some things. They're going to love some things. You may like some things. Some people may love or hate things. Like some features are going to be divisive like that, right? What the whole point of the matter is you want to encourage yourself to keep going. You want to ship this thing. You want to keep moving. Because here's the thing. We see this in investment, the kind of training all the time. And this is not investment advice, but we see this in investment training all the time where people will start to panic. Oh my God, my stocks are going down. I own 10 stocks and they're going down. I better sell. So then they sell and then it goes back up and it's like, and now if I rebuy back in, I'm actually losing money because I'm buying at a higher, whereas if you sometimes just wait, depending on the situation, that panic was like, zoom that graph out from like 1 month to like a year, maybe 2 years, 10 years. That blip, the thing where it went down, sometimes isn't even visible. And if it is visible, it's like, look at that. That's a little tiny dip, and then it keeps going. If you weren't aware of that dip, like if you weren't watching your stocks that day, you wouldn't even think about it. So that's ultimately what you want to do here is you want to ship your product, right? Choose your MVP, ship it, because if you ship a feature that people hate, you're not going to notice that dip. Like just go fix it and maybe that dip will go away. You can't be so reactive to not only the people complaining once you do ship and once you get that validation, but you, more importantly, cannot be so reactive to your own ideas. You have to be strict and say, no, that's not in the MVP, that goes on the wish list.
I think it's like a lot of these are super important to understand and actually act on. Like saying it is one thing, like, plan for iteration or especially validate quickly. Those things are very important from a theoretical sense, but actually executing on those is a lot more difficult than you think, but it is a requirement of you being successfully shipping a product. I'll talk about this because essentially when you ship a product, 99% of the time, it's not in its best state. You have to be okay with that. This is the whole prevents perfectionism, but you have to be okay with shipping a product that's in its worst state that it's ever going to be, right? It has to be functional. Let me be clear here. The features that you build have to be functional. They have to be as good as you can make them in a reasonable amount of time, right? But they will not be perfect and they will not be the best that they can be because you don't know how people are going to use it. Couple different things. You can find a niche. You can find a product that you want to build. You can think that you have the solution for everyone, right? Like for instance, this golf app that we're building potentially in the next couple of weeks. We have this thought, Matt's trying to solve his own kind of problem, which is a really good step that you want to take, right? Like you have a problem, you try to solve it. But the reality is that Matt's problem might not be everyone else's problem. And what's going to end up happening, almost guaranteed if we release it out into the public, is someone will use the app and immediately be like, that's not how I would probably use it, right? And the best thing you can do is like over the shoulder, look at how your users are using your app quickly. Because that's going to tell you where you need to focus your energy on. Now, one user using the app incorrectly is not enough reason to actually go and pivot, But if you notice, 5, 10, all of your users that you have initially are using the app in a completely different way than you expected, then you need to be able to quickly iterate and create something that they would want to use more, right? Like the whole point of these applications, the whole point of what you're building is you want to get people to use them as much as possible. If they use them once and never use them again, you've failed, right? You failed from a perspective of creating a product that actually works in the industry. So there's a lot of back and forth feedback that you have to be willing to take and you have to be willing to put in. And then there's quick, not only like prepare for iteration, prepare for very quick iteration. This is something that I've learned is that when you initially release a product, someone reports an actual bug. This might seem crazy, but in the initial stages, if you want to keep people happy, you've got hours to fix it. This is a new product. If you don't fix it within a few hours, it could be that you lose that customer, right? But if you fix it, this is the other thing. If you fix it quickly and if you're communicating with that customer in some sort of way while you're fixing it, you might have gained a customer for life. So this is the iteration part of it that is more complex than you think, because if you're able to engage with your audience, be willing to iterate and validate your features quickly, you might actually gain an audience of extremely dedicated customers that will shape the direction of your product for many months to come until it becomes a more established and a more complete version of whatever you're creating, right? This is important to realize. As the product grows, this kind of mentality changes. Obviously, you can't fix everything in hours as you start getting, hundreds and hundreds of requests and stuff like that in. You need to kind of establish a line where you're like, okay, now it's like we have a longer lead time, we still communicate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is that if you want a successful product, you need to be where your customers are and you need to be continually communicating with them as well as iterating.
The customer support angle is really interesting, especially for people listening to this that are thinking of making a SaaS, very specifically. Like if we ship this golf app and people are yelling at us, I mean, I'm kind of shipping this for me almost at this point, and it is a content machine. So, I mean, we don't like really care about like getting a bunch of customers all the time, but like for the people out there that are like really trying to make a membership site or something like that, it's a really good point. Because if, someone really trusts you and they're like, man, this person's really responsive to my support requests, and maybe like an IM, even if they're instant messaging you through some sort of support software and you're being really receptive and really responsive, then, certainly, they might be like, man, this is awesome. So if I have a complaint again or a suggestion, like I know this person cares, right? I'm going to get some good feedback. I'm going to get some good, like maybe they'll actually build this feature for me. Like it's a pretty cool kind of relationship. And so, yeah, it encourages some people to stick around. So how do we do this, right? It's an MVP, right? You're establishing clear criteria, all the stuff I've already said, right? Ultimately, what we're doing is something that we hear all the time, and we hear it all the time in sort of the SEO space, which is especially content sites, which is niching down, okay? So one of the ways that we can kind of very clearly set an MVP is we niche what we're doing down. So really basic example, we don't want, in this golf app that we're talking about, we don't want the guy who needs all the features of a golf app. We don't want that. We don't need the person that needs tons of statistics, big breakdowns, needs to have the course preloaded for them, all that stuff. We want the person that just goes out there and says, I just would like to digitally record this, either post or during the round, maybe even, right? And they just want to know their scores. Devs, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less on Studio. Integrate, extend, and write custom scripts in a VS Code-based IDE. Leverage zero setup dev, test, and production environments. Ship faster with an AI code assistant. And work with Wix headless APIs on any tech stack. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Link in the show description and in the show notes. They don't need to know how many putts per hole, what's their green regulation, what's all this other stuff. And so we effectively, by doing this, by saying, okay, we don't need all that stuff. We don't want to provide all that stuff. We've niched our product down. We want to niche it down to someone who just needs a simple score tracker and just needs some basic records, right? So we've defined our audience by saying that. We defined a clear audience. And we're saying that's our audience. It's the basic sort of golf user, if you will, They don't need all this superfluous stuff, all this extra stuff. Really, by doing this, we're defining a problem that needs to be solved. And it's a problem that I have, and also the people that I golf with have, which is these other apps are too much. It's A, they're killing the battery like crazy. B, we have, range finders. There's also stakes at the course that tell you the range of things. So we don't need this app to say, it's this far away. Did you reach the green this time? We don't need all that stuff, right? So it's solving a problem, and that is basic golf stats. Easy. And by doing that, we're also limiting the scope of the project. We're saying we don't really need an API. We're not reaching out to detect what golf courses are around. We're not, doing all this other stuff. Like, for example, I use an app called Golf Canada. In Golf Canada, some of my courses aren't on there because they're not members of Golf Canada. Like, imagine the scope of your app if you're like, I'm creating an exclusive club. And this is not me complaining about Golf Canada. I use it all the time. But imagine we were like, yeah, we're going to get people to join our club. We're going to have to call hundreds, thousands, whatever of golf courses and have them join us so that they're listed in our... No, that's ridiculous. Even if we say, okay, we're going to use Google Maps data and we're going to pull from all these golf clubs, it's still ridiculous. We've limited the scope, right? We've focused on core features, which is, maybe we'll allow the user to type in, I went to, this, whatever, Oak Gables Golf Club. I went to this place. And then that saves it in their courses and they can refer to that every now and then. Maybe that'll be a feature. Maybe it won't, right? We're trying to prevent feature overload. We don't want there to be all these features where we're required to develop like, we got to talk to Google Maps. We got to call the courses. We're trying to create a club. We're trying to pulled in too many different directions, right? We're trying to maintain simplicity. We're trying to say, this is our core value. It's a simple golf stats app. We're maintaining that simplicity. We're niching down to that. And whenever we think of an idea, we need to have a meeting. We need to have a conversation on, do we add this feature, right? Once we've locked in the initial features that is niched down for our MVP, we need to maintain that feature list. And only when it's debated and decided that, hey, we should add this other feature, because there's sometimes things going to be like, hey, we don't need this feature. And then you go to use it and you're like, oh, we need that feature. Like, oh yeah, that needs to be in the MVP. Fair enough. That's some quick validation. You tested it internally. You tested it with some friends. Oh, this sucks without this feature. We need that, right? So sometimes the scope will grow a little bit and the niche down will grow a little bit, right? Maybe we'll niche up a little bit then. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it easier to make decisions on the fly. Someone comes up with an idea, throw it in the wish list, right? Throw it in the wish list. We don't want to keep, everyone stop developing for a second. Should we add the hotel feature? Everyone stop developing for a second. Do we need what tee the people were playing on? Everyone stop for a sec. It's like, hey, we're getting tired of making these decisions. There's too many decisions. Stop that. Let's keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Stop pausing and just keep moving forward. Work toward your niched down MVP vision. You need to stay aligned with your vision. Our vision, said it a million times, easy golf tracking app. That's our vision. That's what we want. We want it to be simple by design. We don't want there to be 1,000,001 features that kill your battery and, whatever. We don't need that stuff. A great example is, one of the things you can do in a lot of these apps is you quickly add your score. So let's say you go to there's a course, you shoot 100. Okay, great. Select the course, type in 100. And then it says, hey, do you want to add a picture? Usually the picture is a picture of the scorecard. Maybe it's of the course if you have a nice picture of it, something like that. That's not really a part of our vision. It's kind of cool. I wouldn't mind learning how to allow people to upload photos like that and deal with the compression of it and stuff. Not a part of our vision, goes on the potential list. Because that is really simple and it doesn't really break out of our vision, but it's not required. No one's going to go, I want to specifically add pictures. At least I don't think so, right? I want to not include that, not worry about developing and storing those photos, and I want to ship it and see what people say. This ultimately makes it easier to market and test. I'm not marketing 18,000, features. I'm not testing all this stuff. It's very possible that the entire app works great from a technical perspective, and the photo section breaks. Now that's more testing. That's more troubleshooting, right? That's more iterating. Oh, we have to iterate on the photos because people are taking photos that are 14K now on their super fancy smartphones, and we need to somehow compensate for that. Well, how do we computationally kind of compress those images down? Do we rely on the device to do it? Do we rely on our servers? Well, let's just take the raw image. Well, should we? Because now we're going to pay for all that storage. That's a lot of decisions just on this one small feature. And it's a very key note on, hey, keep that niche down in check. Niche down, not up. Set those clear boundaries. Set them. Don't forget them. And it's easy to forget them.
Niching down is so important, but it sometimes feels limiting. I feel like I've had these conversations like a bit with a few kind of people that wanted to create apps, and they're like, well, I want to create an app for everyone. And my conversation is always like, well, just niche down to a very direct audience. And the other key thing about the direct audience is either has to be something you're very familiar with. So for instance, the golf app. Matt's very familiar with golf. He's been golfing nonstop for like 2 years now. He's been trying to get that. So this is solving his problem. That's a really good way to niche down. You solve your own problem. You solve that problem the best you can for yourself and hope that it helps other people. Perfectly good example of how to find your niche. The other way to find a niche is you need to have an in with the community. So maybe you're a rock climber, right? You really like rock climbing. And you see there's a space there that's not being filled by an app or a product or whatever. That's another way for you to be able to kind of niche down from a place of knowledge. The thing that I see people get wrong a lot is like they try to niche down into something that they have no idea about. So maybe they're, something like a gardener, but they want to create an app that targets, I don't know, like plumbers. For whatever reason. They just want to create an app for plumbers. I don't know why. But regardless, that is a huge uphill battle. You need to have an in. Now, if you are a gardener and you have your dad's a plumber and you notice that your dad has trouble invoicing because all the current invoicing software doesn't really target plumbers, right? That's a in that you have that provides a niche that you can build because you're a web developer too, obviously, that you can build and create a product for that makes sense because now you have an in. Now you can go to your dad and be like, hey, can you get your friends to use this and tell me if it's the right? Or can I sit down with you and go through your requirements? Like what don't you get from the current like QuickBooks that you would want for a specific plumbing invoicing application? You need to have that kind of mentality where you're directly solving for an audience. You're directly solving for yourself that you have knowledge in the topic. And you need to be able to have that back and forth, either with yourself or with the people that you're solving it for, to create that product for that niche.
The limiting angle is so commonly said. Like people will always say, I don't want to, and it's really common for content sites. So I'll use that as an example. Content sites, people go like, I want to write about golf. I want to write about desks or whatever. And they don't niche down to say, I'm going to talk about, gaming desks. They'll be like, I don't want to be limited. Like, I want to talk about fancy desks, mid desks, like antique desks. And it's like, whoa, hang on here. You're talking about a lot of different things. And I mean, I don't know how successful you're going to be just talking about desks, but just for the sake of this audio show example, it's like, do you have an antique expert on file? Do you know a lot about antique desks, or do you know about one antique desk? Like, you probably should be limited to a point. Like, gamers have a lot of, wants and needs and stuff like that. Like, there's streamers that do it professionally. There's people that are just, they do stream, but they're just messing around. Some people want convenience and stuff like that. So it's like, there's a lot of things to talk about just in the gaming niche on desks. There's a lot of desk accessories. There's USB hubs. There's monitor mounts. There's like a drink holder. Like I have a drink holder on my desk. I have an under desk mount for my headset, which is fantastic. It keeps it out of the way. It's not dusty. It's just out of the way. The drink holder is great because if it gets bumped, it just stays in its own drink holder, almost like a car drink holder, but it's hanging off the side of the desk. There was a cable management thing that I removed, and that's a feature that somebody could talk about, right? And people fail to realize, like, if you niche down, there's still a lot to talk about. And a lot of the time, people want that like really intricate knowledge, right? They go and they go to shop around for a desk and they go, I actually, my monitor mount won't fit with that cable managing thing. Can that come off? If you're trying to cover like every type of desk, you're not going to have that intricate knowledge, chances are, of these specific gaming desks. But if you really niche down, it's like, you're going to be the source for gaming desks. You're not the source for desks of every kind, including antique desks. You're going to be the source for gaming desks. And that's powerful. That's a powerful niche down. And it sounds limiting. Like Mike said, you're like, man, I don't want to just write about gaming desks. But if you really look at it, you're like, oh, shoot, I got a lot of stuff to cover here. I actually don't want to write about anything else. So look inward and look at ways that like sort of pulling that need to expand from your niche itself and take a look and say, well, what else could I cover here? Well, streaming equipment that mounts to the desk, that's desk related and that's gaming desk related. Perfect. Maybe that's something where you're niching down, but you've already set clear boundaries and you're respecting those boundaries. This next thing here is how to prioritize features. I actually, when I was doing the research for this episode, I learned about this. It's called the Moscow system, I guess. And it's must have, should have, could have, won't have. It's an acronym. And this helps you to prioritize and prevent adding unnecessary features. So this is going to be less of a kind of conversational section of the episode. I'm just going to literally talk about this system because I think it's cool because I've never tried it. So the first part is must have. These are non-negotiable items, and without them, the project would not function as intended. So in a personal project, this might be something like a piece of core functionality, such as our golf scoring app better be able to track score in numbers. Or maybe you have a unique selling point, like in our golf app, it's simple, that's the whole point. So this is a must-have. Our golf tracking app must be able to track the score in numbers, and it must be simple. 2 core things, these must-have. Then there's should have. So these features are not as important as the must-haves, but see, this is even me, even when I'm trying to describe this, it's kind of weird, right? So these should haves provide value and they improve the user experience. However, if timelines can become tight, you can cut them. So not everything in an MVP is minimal. Like some stuff you're going to be like, yo, I'm 90% sure that should be in there because it's 90, let's do it. But you might be like, you know what? It's getting down to the wire. Let's ship that in a hotfix. Let's ship that next week. Not phase 2, phase 1.5, not version 2, version 1.1, right? These are those features where they're like very important, but they're on the edge. I kind of like to think of them as things that you definitely want eventually. Definitely want asterisk, right? Doesn't need to be there on day one, but probably should be there pretty quick. Maybe not launch day, but launch window. Next thing here is could have. So these are nice to have features that would enhance the project, but are not essential. They're bells and whistles. They're superfluous features. Superfluous when looking at the must-haves, right? They're superfluous features that can be included if everything goes smoothly, but don't fall into this trap of being like, let's add a bunch of could-haves and then be like, well, we could have did it. Maybe we should have did it. Oh, we must do it now. It's easy to climb this ladder of like just bumping stuff up a category, right? Don't fall into this trap. The could have, I would say, is more the wish list, like I've been referring to in the rest of the episode. And I am going to mess with this like must have, should have, could have, won't have system, maybe even for this golf app. Maybe I'll list this out and kind of post on X and post on Threads a little bit of talking about it because I do kind of want to try it. It sounds better than just like, we're going to do this. Then they also have a wish list. This is a little more granular. Maybe it'll help me. Maybe it'll hurt me. Who knows? So I'll try it out.
Oh, yeah. I think the 3 could help, right? Like, I think having the must have, should have, could have is definitely going to help. I think won't have, and you're just going to mention it right now, is the really interesting one. Actually, I'm going to read this one. I'm going to take over your point. So won't have, these features are consciously excluded, either because they don't fit the current scope or because they may distract from the main goal. It's important for the firm to know about what won't make a project work, essentially. And I think this one is missed by everyone. Like no one does this unless you're following the system. But I think it does have serious value because if you write this list out, if like this is the planning phase, right? Like you're doing this during the planning phase. If you write this list out during the planning phase, 3 months down the line when you're building the product and you get to a point where you're trying to figure out if a feature should be in, should be not, maybe you had feedback from one of your test groups, it's easy to go back to this list, check it, and this isn't gospel, like this isn't the list that's solidified, but if the feature's in the won't have column, there's probably a good reason for that. And if you forgot about that at this point, it's a good thing to be like, hey, we know what, we've already discussed this, we've already planned this, that this won't be in this version, or maybe even in the next few versions. And I would even go as far as to say maybe having a little explanation as to why for these won't haves. I think the must have, should have, could haves maybe are self-explanatory for the most part, but the won't haves are a little bit more nuanced, and having a little bit of a explanation of why you don't want this feature and why you're specifically writing the fact that you don't want this feature could benefit you down the line when you're trying to make those decisions of like, is this something that we need to build or not? Is this something that we need to add or not, even if we're getting the feedback? Well, if we're decided not to add it because it actually deters from the main focus of the application, like maybe this is a great feature, but it's its own application, like the golf app, like maybe this is the GPS feature. That's something we won't have in the golf app. And that's something we'll write in this spot because of the fact that this is something that deters from the simplicity of the app. And even if 10 people ask for it, we're not going to do it because that's not the point of the app, right? And that's where you kind of solidify this won't have list, and you go almost like headstrong on it to the point where this is like your core, the anti-core values.
It's a really good point because we've been talking almost in like the positive all the time. Like, will I do this? Should I do this? Maybe I'll do it down the road. But we haven't talked about that exact opposite side of the fence, the negative of it, which is like, no, I won't do this. And I can't do this. I shouldn't do this, right? Things like that. It's a really good point because whenever we talk about, sort of niching down, setting up the MVP and stuff like that, we're talking about the positive, like the positive side, like I just said, but we're always talking about it in degrees of the positive. We never really talk about that negative side where it's like, we say we're not doing the GPS app because it deters, like you said. That may actually lead to more won't haves. You might be like, oh, wait, hang on. Well, what else deters from it? What else do other golf apps do that we don't want to do because we think it's superfluous? What else do we think that, amateur golfers are not going to care about? And the thing is like you may have people, yelling at you being like, I'm a scratch golfer and like, I really like your app, but like we need more granular or whatever. It's like, well, hang on, thank you for being a customer, but you're not our customer, right? You're not in that base. Like you want all this like putts per hole and GIR and, FIR, fairway and regulation, green regulation. You got to go somewhere else, man. We don't do that here. Right? That's not what we do here. And that happens so much in products because like people will be like, it doesn't do this, it sucks. And it's like, well, that's not what it's for. We made a Chrome app called multiple accounts for Outlook.com. And someone was complaining that it didn't work with their Microsoft 365 like enterprise. I guess it was Office 365 Enterprise at the time account. And I was like, it's not for that. It says it in the name. It's for Outlook.com. It's for the consumer version of the email. And, it's like, oh, 1 star. And it's like, no, like, I understand that you don't like that, but that's like saying you go to the Wendy's app and you complain you can't order A&W. That's crazy, right?
Well, why can't you? That's bullshit.
Oh, that I only want one food ordering app and it's ridiculous. It's like saying, well, why doesn't the Wendy's app function like DoorDash? Like, well, then download DoorDash. Like, get out of here. So this won't have is really interesting when you said it like that. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to post this on socials. I'm going to do this Moscow system and see what happens. The next section is establishing milestones. So it's sort of like we're kind of coming to the conclusion of the episode a little bit, and we're saying, okay, we've set our MVP, we've niched our stuff down, we've talked about the positives and negatives, and we've done this Moscow system. Now what? Well, we should establish milestones, and that is we want to break the project into small, achievable milestones. And the first milestone should not be I'm going to build it and then ship it. That's ridiculous. What you want to do is you want to have a breakdown and you want to say, all right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this thing to have a UI. Second thing we're going to do, we want to make sure that this data is storable locally. Third thing we want to do is we want to store it in the cloud. Oh, different users use this thing. Fourth thing we want to do is we want to have an authentication system. And each of these can be a clear and achievable goal or milestone. And you can prioritize these milestones. So for example, maybe we start with UI, which sounds like, hey, what the heck? Why are we starting with UI? By having a UI, maybe you've decided that this is really important because now all of our features can be tested in a close to quote unquote finalized MVP UI. And so now everybody can just build with these UI features that you have, and they're not just building their own custom UIs to get technical features running and then have someone come in and convert it all to the UI. Maybe you've decided to do that. So prioritize your milestones accordingly. Maybe you think that for some reason storing numbers is going to be really, 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 really difficult. You're not even sure if it's possible. Maybe that's milestone 1. See if this approach is going to be possible. That might be one of your milestones, right? The key here is that you want to keep your milestones small and you want to keep them manageable. You don't want it to be, milestone 1 is ship the app internationally with all localization. It's like, well, hang on. Hey, whoa. Maybe our milestone is translate it to English, translate it to French, translate it to Spanish. Choose your languages you want to localize it in, right? Translate it to this, that, the other thing. Change the verbiage here. The plus sign's usually on the left in this country, so do that. Oh, the plus sign's on the right in this country. Okay, localize that. Little things like that. each country or each localization maybe could be a milestone. Keep it small and manageable because you're going to be all over the place. You're going to start making mistakes. And the other thing too, and we've discussed this in the past so much, it's creating logical phases. Like clients will come to us with just this balloon of a project and they don't have the budget. And we'll say to them like, the heck with all this. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Let's do 4 phases. Let's do 3 phases. Let's do 2 phases. And they usually roll their eyes and go like, are you trying to get out of work? It's like, I'm not trying to get out of work. I'm trying to make this so that each of these phases is better quality. Your budget is going to be stretched really thin to do all 4 phases in one. Let's split it up and let's have some nice phases. And in the long run, yeah, you are going to be paying more, but the payments are going to be stretched out. Your phases are going to be way better. And when clients do go with us on this, let's say we do split it into 4 phases, the amount of times I've done phase 4 has been like twice in my entire career. Usually they get to phase 3 and they're like, actually, phase 4 seems kind of superfluous. Let's just not do that. We don't really use that. Or we didn't realize how much time, phase 2, we shipped the blog. We didn't realize how much time and effort it was going to take to write the blog posts. Let's not do phase 4 because it's going to distract our writers from writing good blog posts. That's really good. That's what you want. You want logical phases that help niche the project down, even through iterations. You want to make sure that these milestones make sense financially, logically, and just at the end of the day, help push the product forward. Something else here that you can do, and this is a personal project, so maybe you don't want to do this, is you can set deadlines for each milestone. Now, again, it's a personal project. Maybe you don't want the pressure of that. This is up to you. Some people love deadlines. Some people hate deadlines. Some people are like, hey, I won't really work that well without a deadline, but it's a personal project and I just don't know. Maybe set a deadline as like October, November. It doesn't have to be November 1st. Or November, 15th, it could just be November sometime. So when you start reaching the end or maybe early November, you're like, I better get her going, right? And I mean, some other things you can do. Some of this might be a little superfluous if it's a personal project, but you can measure your progress, right? You can take little notes, like almost like you're updating a Jira ticket in a way kind of thing. You could make your own little notes. You can like evaluate every now and then, maybe every week. If you're working on this thing a lot, you could take a look and you could say, all right, how are we doing? Well, this is going real slow. Okay, we need to adjust the other deadlines, things like that, right? And, celebrate the little wins. Okay, we've shipped the first beta, to my friends and family. Cool, that's like almost like a pat on the back, and it's a bit of like self-affirmation of like, sweet, we are moving toward MVP launch version 1.0 to the public, right? What this ultimately does is it prevents you from being overwhelmed. If you look at all the phases all at once and you're like, whoa, like what is this? That's not good, right? You want to work on this thing, and it's a personal project. You probably want to have fun with it. You probably want to take the bite-sized pieces and be like, oh man, I got the scoring working today. That's awesome. Boom. One deadline done. Next one. What's the next milestone, right? By doing this as well, it helps you iterate in the future. It helps your iterative development. It allows you to go, okay, I've done all my milestones, hit all my milestones for my MVP. I'm going to ship version 1.0. Fantastic. You can continue using the milestone system in order to ship version 1.1, 2.0, et cetera, et cetera. You can use this same, now you're in practice, this method of saying, okay, now I want to do my should haves from the Moscow system, right? Now I want to do those. This helps you prioritize features. It keeps the end goal in sight. You want to, cut and remove things from your milestones. You might say, this milestone's too big. I got to take this and split it into 2. And honestly, this feature sucks. I'm getting this out of here. You might do that. Great. All you're doing is niching down. You're shaving things off. You're working toward that MVP. You're pushing forward. It keeps the end goal in sight and hopefully at a lower stress level.
One really important facet of all this is it avoids the kind of stereotypical developer mindset of just jumping into code right away. And I think that's really important. I think it's important to go through these planning phases. I think it's important to go through the logical, like prioritize milestones phases and the checking your progress phases, because having smaller milestones allows you to get to an endpoint really quickly. And that's super, super key for you to continue to gain momentum. Momentum is your number one focus when you're creating a small project like this that doesn't have like an immediate feedback loop for you, right? The reason that there's a graveyard of side projects in your GitHub repo is you were not able to keep momentum. So celebrating small wins is something to help you keep momentum. Measuring progress is something to help you keep momentum. It is not a waste of time. That's what I want to try to get through to people, is that sitting down and recording these little initiatives, recording these little lists of tasks that you want to do today, prioritizing things, creating that design document, quote unquote, not a game design document, but one of those, like a design document of some sorts, will help you keep focus, continue to gain momentum, and have a more complete product in the end through all of these little phases that you're doing. Creating a product is not about coding. As much as you want to think that, your code skills are great and you're upping your code skills, yes, part of the process, probably a significant part of the process is coding. But it's not about that. It's about being able to maintain that like cyclical nature of your mind being like, I don't want to work on this anymore. How do you fix that? Like you're going to be battling yourself on finishing this project. You need to give yourself as many tools as you can to battle. Because if you don't, you're just not going to finish it.
Yeah, like once that like luster, once that like initial spark and excitement shows up and then is gone, and then you realize like, oh, I got to get into the weeds of this. Usually you're like, I don't want to actually do this. Like I want the result, but I don't want to actually do this. Mike's 100% correct. You have to give yourself as many tools as possible in methodologies, celebrations, do this and that, whatever. Like a celebration could be, something that just is like, yo, I'm just not going to work on it tonight. I'm just going to go play a video game. I'm just going to go, I don't know, whatever. Like it doesn't have to be something huge. At the end of the day, you just want to keep, like Mike said, momentum. You just want to keep moving forward. You don't want yourself to get stuck. And I mean, I have a few things in my GitHub repo that are just like garbage. Like, I mean, I did like 2 days and I was like super into it. Then I was like, kind of sucks. And then I was like, well, I got a client project. I can't do this. You start making excuses. I can't do this, actually. I got a client project. And then the client project gets delayed and you're like, well, the client project's delayed. I got to wait around now. And and then it doesn't get done. That sucks. You lose momentum. So hopefully these kind of points that we've made in this episode can kind of help you, get these side projects whether they're like in your actual repo now and they're stuck, or whether like you're thinking of a cool idea and you're like, I don't want this to get stuck. Hopefully these ideas can really help you. And my last point, which is also the kind of the conclusion of the episode, is a lot of what we talked about today is setting strict boundaries, right? Ultimately, having strict limits, being kind of strict with yourself, it helps to prevent a project from going off the rails. Whether that means losing momentum, growing too big, scope creep, all that stuff. By setting strict boundaries, by kind of being strict with yourself, it helps you at the end of the day go, today I'm working on this. Rather than you go, I got to work on this project. There's 18 features pending. What am I supposed to be doing? It gives you an objective. It allows you to keep going, hopefully build and keep momentum. And it's setting clear limits on what your project will and won't include. If you can be strict with yourself and say, these are the boundaries, these are the milestones, I want this thing to progress. And in order to progress, I've set up 18 milestones and I better get milestone 1 done today. I better get milestone 2 done today. It's better than jumping around a project all over the place, doing a little bit of UI, a little bit of back-end work, a little bit of hosting work, a little bit of marketing, right? You have to keep thinking of this like hey, I want this project to ship on time. I want my career to reflect that I shipped some stuff, whether or not, you ship as many things as you want. It's the same as golfing, whether your golf swing is ever as good at the end of your career as you want it to be. Point of the matter is, though, you went out there and you did it. You went out there and you swung at the ball, to make a metaphor out of it. You swung at the ball. You tried to play golf. You did play golf, whatever. In this case, you shipped some projects. You shipped some apps, whether they were good, bad, or ugly. I mean, Mike and I made like a stock photo website and it didn't go anywhere, and that sucks. But I don't look on that and say, that project sucked. I never say that. It's like, I bring that up. Hey, we did this. It was kind of cool. It didn't go too far. I want to like kind of end this on like almost a personal note, which is like a lot of people in your personal life may be like, well, how did it do? Where's the money coming from? And kind of like look down on you. And it's sort of like, forget those people. Like that's a boundary that I'll set where it's like, I don't care what they asked. I'm sticking to my milestones. I'm working through the phases. I'm working on my niche down product. I'm working on my MVP. Like I believe in this thing. Because here's the thing. If we ship this golf app makes us $1 million, all of a sudden, all those people that said, well, that's stupid are like, oh, you're doing great, aren't you? It's like, oh, like it's weird. Like humans have this weird thing where it's like our small talk is like superiority talk sometimes. And I hate that. So That's just a personal note for me, is like, if people are just like, well, how much money is it going to bring you? Why are you doing that other thing over there? But if you say something like, well, it makes me $1,000 a month, it's like, oh, you're doing great. And then you never hear a complaint from them again. So just stick to your guns, set some boundaries, socially, literally, technically, whatever, and ship those projects.
Yeah, and you never know the consequences of your actions with these projects. Like if you complete a project and it's financially a failure, like Matt said, people come up to you, ask you if it made any money, you say no, and they'll look down on you. Totally feasible situation that happens all the freaking time. I've had it happen to me many times. 6 months down the line, a job comes up open and needs exactly the expertise of the project that you built. Easy peasy for you to get into that interview. Easy peasy for you to win that interview because you just talk about something you've already done. And you'll get the job most likely. This has happened to us, like with Clips to Riches, with all these other Chrome apps. We've talked about this before. We built those apps. Were they financially a success? No, not really. We did make some money. I don't want to say we didn't make $0. We made some money on them. But they were not a financial success. People did look down on us for it. We did have those conversations that Matt was saying, like, oh, did it make any money? You spent all these weeks on it. No, didn't make any money. But then, a month later, 2 months later, we landed our biggest client yet because of them, right? And we learned so much through them that we were able to take on bigger projects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The consequences of these projects aren't always going to be a successful product. But if you can build on top of the skills you gain from them and you continue down the path of that motivation and the experience path and just keep snowballing yourself into a better developer and a better product developer, it will pay off. That's the key here, is that if you continue to do it, it will pay off. If you stop halfway through every project, sure, you gain a bunch of skills during that half, but it's not the same as completing something. And trust me, it's going to be a huge difference when you complete it.
It's good, some good closing notes, because I do remember those conversations that we had with friends and family. Like, that's kind of the thing that's standing out to me right now, is because you haven't mentioned it throughout the episode. But it's like, oh, how much money did you make on that? It's like, oh, $50, $40, whatever. And then they're like, oh, well, okay. And then it's sort of like they're looked down on you, and it's like, well, what were you doing on that couple weeks there? What were you doing over there? That's what I do, and that's not good. Like, I'm not recommending you do that, but I start getting a little bit like, what are you doing over there? Or now what I'll do is people will be like, you play golf so much and you're not that good. I'm like, oh, did you just send it into the trees? How long have you been playing again? 10 years. Jeez, man. Losing balls still, are you? And that's not good. Don't do that. I do that. I get pretty perturbed, and then I start passing out the passive aggressiveness instead of passive income. But anyway, we're not going to go to there today, but we would like you to go to our Patreon if you want to support episodes like this. That's patreon.com/HTML all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons: Tim from the Web Hacker on the webhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, and Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. And feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.